The shadow of tyranny. The three moons of Caladan cast long, eerie shadows across the crystal forests as Vexara and her small band of resistance fighters moved silently through the underbrush. Their scaled skin, normally iridescent in daylight, was dulled with mud and ash to avoid detection by the Supreme Commander's orbital scanners. Vexara's heart chambers pulsed with anxiety, but her outer membranes remained still, betraying nothing of her inner turmoil to her companions. "The supply convoy should be passing through this ravine in approximately 12 minutes, whispered Tarek, her most trusted lieutenant. His voice sac vibrated softly, producing sounds only those in their immediate vicinity could hear. Vexara nodded, her elongated head crest flattening in acknowledgement. "Remember, we need the medical supplies intact. Target the guards only. No explosives unless absolutely necessary." The Resistance had been fighting Supreme Commander Zolfar's regime for nearly 8 cycles, but their numbers were dwindling. What had once been a planet-wide movement of thousands had been reduced to scattered cells of desperate fighters. Zolfar's technological superiority, granted by his alliance with the fearsome Gorvan Empire, had crushed most organized resistance. His surveillance systems were everywhere. Microscopic drones disguised as native insects, quantum scanners built into every public structure, and the dreaded thought police with their mind probe technology. Freedom was a distant memory for most Caledonians. The younger generation had never known a time before Zolfar seized power, executing the entire planetary council and declaring himself supreme commander. Taxes drained resources from the common people, while the elite military caste enjoyed unprecedented luxury. Dissenters vanished in the night, only to reappear as hollow shells in re-education broadcasts. The distant rumble of hover transports broke Vexara from her thoughts. She raised a 3-fingered hand, signaling her fighters to take positions. The plan was simple: disable the transport's repulsor field with a targeted electromagnetic pulse, neutralize the guards, and escape with critical medical supplies before reinforcements arrived. "EMP ready," Merrill whispered, his technical appendages delicately adjusting the stolen device. The transport appeared around the bend, its sleek metallic surface gleaming faintly in the moonlight. 4 armed guards flanked it, their exoskeletons enhancing their already formidable Caledonian strength. Vexara gave the signal, and Merrill activated the EMP. For a moment, nothing happened. And then panic surged through her as she realized their fatal mistake. The transport wasn't using standard repulsor technology. It was equipped with the new quantum-shielded generator that the Resistance's intelligence hadn't warned them about. Before she could call for retreat, alarm sirens blared from the transport. The guards' helmets snapped closed as they activated their weapons, and from the transport's roof, a concealed turret emerged. "It's a trap," Vexara screamed, abandoning stealth. "Scatter." The night erupted in chaos. Energy bolts tore through the crystal vegetation, shattering the delicate structures into deadly flying shards. 2 of her fighters fell immediately, their bodies smoking from direct hits. Carrick managed to take down 1 guard with a lucky shot before being wounded in the shoulder membrane. Vexara fired her pulse rifle desperately, trying to create cover for her remaining team to retreat. But the transport had released hunter drones, small, spider-like machines that moved with terrifying speed through the underbrush. "Vexara, run," Merrill shouted, just before a drone leaped onto his back, injecting him with paralytic toxin. She wanted to stay and fight, but survival of the Resistance depended on someone escaping to warn the others. Abandoning her rifle, she sprinted through the crystal forest, using paths only native Caledonians would know. Her superior knowledge of the terrain might give her the edge she needed to escape. For 20 minutes, she evaded capture, working her way toward an abandoned mining tunnel that connected to a Resistance safe house. She had almost reached the entrance when a blinding light from above trapped her in its beam. Looking up, she saw the sleek shape of Zolfar's personal shuttle descending. The Supreme Commander himself had joined the hunt. There would be no escape now. As the stun net enveloped her, her last conscious thought was of how they had been betrayed. Someone had known their plans. Someone had set them up. The interrogation chamber within Zolthar's palace was designed to break not just bodies, but spirits. Vexora hung suspended in a gravitational restraint field, her limbs stretched painfully as the field manipulated her very cellular structure. Before her stood Supreme Commander Zolthar himself, his massive frame enhanced by cybernetic implants that gave him both terrifying strength and unnaturally long life. "The famous Vexora," he said, his voice unexpectedly soft and cultured. "Leader of the so-called Free Caladan movement, I expected someone more impressive." Vexora remained silent, focusing on controlling her breathing to manage the pain. "Your silence is pointless," Zolthar continued, pacing around her. "We've already captured most of your cell." Tarak, in particular, was quite cooperative once we applied the neural extractor. She flinched involuntarily at the mention of Tarak. The neural extractor was a Gorvan invention that literally pulled memories from the victim's mind, leaving them brain damaged or dead in the process. "Now," Zolthar said, "we could do the same to you. But frankly, I'm curious why you continue this pointless resistance. Your movement is crushed. The people have accepted my rule. Caladan prospers under the protection of the Gorvan Empire." "Prospers?" Vexora couldn't hold back. "The outer provinces are starving. Children die of curable diseases while your military hoards medical supplies. You've turned our people into slaves." Zolthar sighed, as if disappointed by her response. "Always the same tedious complaints. You fail to see the bigger picture. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Vexora. Without strength, without order, we would be conquered or exterminated. I do what is necessary to ensure our survival." He gestured to a view screen that materialized in the air beside them. It showed images of distant star systems, unfamiliar alien species, and scenes of devastating warfare. "The Gorvan Empire protects us from threats you cannot imagine. Yes, there is a cost, but it is a cost worth paying." Vexora laughed bitterly despite her pain. "You don't care about protecting Caladan. You care about power. About being the one who decides who lives and who dies." Zolthar's expression hardened. "You know nothing of my burdens. But no matter. This conversation is merely a courtesy before your public execution." A communications officer entered the chamber and approached Zolthar cautiously, whispering something in his earfold. The Supreme Commander's expression shifted to one of curiosity and concern. "Are you certain?" he asked. The officer nodded, handing him a data crystal. Zolthar inserted the crystal into his wrist computer, and a holographic display appeared, showing a strange vessel approaching Caledonian space. "Interesting timing," he murmured, studying the readout. "Unknown design, using a propulsion system our sensors can barely analyze. Not Gorvan technologies, certainly." He turned back to Vexora, his eyes narrow with suspicion. "Would this be the reinforcement you're expecting? Some new ally you've contacted?" Vexora was genuinely confused. The Resistance had no off-world allies. They had tried repeatedly to send distress signals beyond their system, but Zolthar's orbital blockers prevented any unauthorized communications. Whatever this vessel was, it wasn't connected to the Resistance. Zolthar must have seen the genuine confusion in her face. "No matter. If they're hostile, they'll be destroyed. If they're potential allies, they'll soon learn the price of opposing me." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Your execution is scheduled for tomorrow's dawn. It will be broadcast across the entire planet as a reminder of the futility of resistance. I suggest you use your remaining hours to make peace with whatever deities you believe in." As the door sealed behind him, Vexora closed her inner eyelids in exhaustion. The resistance was finished. Her friends were captured or dead. Tomorrow she would join them. And with her death, perhaps the last real hope for Caladan's freedom would die too. Yet as she hung there in the darkness, her thoughts turned to the mysterious vessel. Who were they? Where had they come from? And was there any possibility, however slim, that they represented something Zolthar truly feared? For the first time in many cycles, Vexera allowed herself to feel a dangerous emotion: hope. In the grand observation chamber of his palace, Supreme Commander Zolthar stood surrounded by his military advisors and scientists. The mysterious vessel had entered Caledonian orbit an hour ago and had been broadcasting a message on all frequencies, a peaceful greeting in multiple languages, including a surprisingly accurate rendition of formal Caledonian. "They call themselves humans," reported Chief Science Officer Nex, "from a planet called Earth in a system our star charts don't even record. They claim to be on a mission of peaceful exploration and cultural exchange." "And you believe this?" Zolthar asked skeptically. "Their vessel is small, with minimal armaments. Scans show only 28 life forms aboard. If their intention was conquest, they've come woefully unprepared." Zolthar studied the holographic representation of the human ship. It was unlike anything in Gorvan design philosophy, less aggressive, more elegant, with obvious emphasis on sensors rather than weapons. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we should welcome these humans, learn what we can about them and their technology. The Gorvans would be interested in a report on a previously unknown spacefaring species." And added his military commander, "If they prove troublesome, they're already within our defensive perimeter. We could eliminate them at any time." Zolthar nodded. "Send a response. Invite them to send a small delegation to the palace. No more than 5 representatives." As his officers hurried to carry out his orders, Zolthar returned his attention to the execution schedule for the next day. The arrival of these humans provided an excellent opportunity, a demonstration of his power not just to his own people, but to these newcomers as well. They would witness what happened to those who opposed his rule and carry that message back to their homeworld. A smile spread across his face as he imagined the fear in the humans' eyes when they witnessed Caledonian justice. Yes, this would work out perfectly. In her cell, Vexera had lost track of time. The pain from her interrogation had subsided to a dull ache, but exhaustion and despair weighed on her more heavily than any physical discomfort. Tomorrow's execution loomed in her mind, not death itself. She had been prepared for that possibility since joining the resistance, but the knowledge that her death would be used to further break her people's spirit. The cell door slid open suddenly, startling her. Instead of the expected guards, a small, strange creature entered. It walked on 2 legs and had no scales, its body covered in some kind of fitted clothing rather than natural armor. Its face was bizarrely flat, with forward-facing eyes, and a curious arrangement of features that seemed impossibly vulnerable. "Hello," the creature said in accented but understandable Caledonian. "My name is Dr. Elena Reyes. I'm a xenobiologist from Earth." Vexera stared in shock. This must be one of the beings from the mysterious vessel, a human. "How did you get in here?" she asked. "Officially, I'm examining you to ensure you're healthy enough for tomorrow's event. Your Supreme Commander seems very concerned that you'll be in prime condition for your public execution." The human's expression showed clear disgust at the concept. "And unofficially?" The human glanced at the surveillance device in the corner, then smiled slightly. She raised a small device from her pocket and pressed it. A faint hum filled the air. "Unofficially, I have about 3 minutes before their systems detect my signal jammer, so listen carefully." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "We know what's happening on Caledon. Your resistance managed to get a message out 6 months ago, a desperate plea for help that reached our deep space listening post. We've been studying your language and culture ever since, planning this mission." Hope and suspicion warred within Vexera. Why would your people care about our struggle? Because humans have a long history of both tyranny and resistance. We've learned the hard way that freedom must be defended, wherever it's threatened. The human placed something tiny in Vexera's palm. "This is a quantum tracker. Keep it hidden. When the time comes tomorrow, we'll be ready." Before Vexera could ask more questions, the human stepped back, deactivated her jammer, and resumed a professional demeanor just as guards appeared at the door. "The prisoner appears malnourished but stable. she reported clinically. "I recommend additional hydration before tomorrow's proceedings." As the human was escorted out, Vexera carefully concealed the tiny device in a natural fold of her skin. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps the fight wasn't over after all. Beyond the crystal forests, beyond the reaches of Caledonian space, something unexpected had entered their world. Something Zolthar couldn't predict or control. Something human. A human solution. The execution plaza was filled to capacity. Thousands of Caledonians stood in ordered rows, their attendance mandatory under penalty of imprisonment. Hovering cameras transmitted the scene to every settlement across the planet. Supreme Commander Zolthar sat on an elevated platform, surrounded by his military elite and special guests. The human delegation, 5 representatives from Earth who had arrived the previous day. Captain Maya Chen observed the proceedings with a carefully neutral expression that masked her inner revulsion. Beside her, Dr. Reyes subtly checked the small device concealed in her palm, confirming that Vexera's tracker was active and in position. The other 3 human delegates, Communications Specialist Jackson, Security Officer Diaz, and Engineer Patel, maintained similar composures, though Chen could sense their tension. Their mission briefing had prepared them for Caledon's oppressive regime, but witnessing it firsthand was different. The fear in the crowd was palpable. The brutal efficiency of Zolthar's security forces, with their advanced weapons and cybernetic enhancements, made their small team's plan seem almost suicidally ambitious. "Nervous, Captain Chen?" asked Zolthar, his voice carrying a mocking undertone. "Your species seems remarkably soft." "Not nervous, Commander," Chen replied evenly. "Merely observing your culture's judicial procedures with professional interest." Zolthar made a sound that might have been a laugh. "This isn't a judicial procedure, Captain. This is a demonstration, a reminder of the consequences of disorder." A murmur ran through the crowd as Vexera was led onto the central platform. Despite her injuries, she walked with dignity, her head crest fully extended in defiance. The quantum tracker Dr. Reyes had given her was virtually undetectable to Caledonian sensors, designed with technology beyond their current understanding. Zolthar rose to address the crowd, his voice booming across the plaza. "Citizens of Caledon, today you witnessed the price of treason. This female, Vexera, leader of the terrorist organization calling itself the Free Caledon Movement, has committed crimes against the unity and prosperity of our world. Her actions have endangered our alliance with the Gorvan Empire and threatened the security of every Caledonian." He gestured toward the human delegation. "Even as we welcome new species to our world, we must show them that Caledon stands united under strong leadership, that we do not tolerate those who would return us to the chaos of the past." Captain Chen met Vexera's gaze across the plaza, a momentary connection that conveyed more than words could. The resistance leader gave an almost imperceptible nod. "The sentence is death," Zolthar declared, "to be carried out immediately." 2 guards positioned Vexera before an advanced weapon platform. The disintegration beam would ensure a quick but spectacularly visible execution, designed to maximize the psychological impact on the watching population. As the weapon powered up with an ominous hum, Captain Chen spoke clearly. "Supreme Commander, as representatives of Earth, we request a moment to observe a human custom before the execution proceeds." Zolthar paused, curiosity momentarily overriding his impatience. "What custom?" "On our world, we offer a final tribute to courage, even in our enemies. It takes only a moment." The Supreme Commander considered, then nodded magnanimously. "Proceed." Chen stepped forward, approaching Vexera. This was the most dangerous moment of their plan. If Zolthar's security detected anything unusual, they would all die here. Standing before Vexera, Chen bowed slightly and spoke in a formal tone. "Vexera of Caledon, though our peoples have just met, we recognize the universal value of those who stand against tyranny." As she spoke, Engineer Patel activated a device concealed within their ceremonial Earth medallions. Quantum entanglement fields began to form, undetectable to Caledonian sensors, but connecting with the tracker inside Vexara. Chen continued, "On Earth, we have a saying. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." This was the signal. Throughout the plaza, microscopic quantum particles, released by their ship upon entering orbit, and now spread throughout the capital, activated simultaneously. These particles, based on experimental technology, even by Earth standards, created momentary disruptions in the neural interfaces of all cybernetically enhanced Caledonians, including Zolfar and his elite guards. In that instant of confusion, several things happened at once. The disintegration beam's targeting system failed, its energy dissipating harmlessly. Dr. Rice tossed a small device to Vexara, who caught it instinctively. A concentrated EMP that disabled her restraints. And from the crowd, dozens of hidden resistance fighters revealed themselves, armed with weapons smuggled in by humans over the previous day. Zolfar roared in rage as his cybernetic enhancements flickered and reset. Treachery. Kill them all. But his security forces were in disarray, their communications and enhanced abilities temporarily disabled. The resistance fighters moved with precision, securing key positions around the plaza. Captain Chen and her team activated personal shield generators, technology far beyond Caledonian understanding, and moved to protect Vexara. This wasn't the plan. Vexara shouted over the chaos, accepting a weapon from one of her newly revealed allies. "Plans change," Chen replied calmly. "Your message reached us, but so did several others from resistance cells across Caledon. We've been coordinating with all of them." Zolfar, recovering faster than his guards, thanks to his superior implants, lunged toward them with inhuman speed. Security Officer Dias stepped forward, activating a gravitational distortion device that slowed the Supreme Commander's charge to a crawl. "Impossible," Zolfar growled, fighting against the localized gravitational field. "The Gorvan Empire will destroy your entire species for this interference." Engineer Patul smiled grimly. "The Gorvans won't be coming to your rescue, Commander. While we've been keeping you occupied here, our main fleet has been engaging their forces at the edge of your system. Not to destroy them, just to deliver a message about the cost of continuing their support for your regime." The revelation stunned Zolfar. Humans had a fleet, with technology advanced enough to challenge the Gorvans. The implications shattered his worldview. Vexara stepped forward, aiming her weapon at Zolfar's chest. "For 8 cycles, you've tortured and killed my people. Justice demands your death." Chen didn't interfere. This was Caledon's fight, and Vexara's decision would shape her world's future. After a long, tense moment, Vexara lowered her weapon slightly. "But we will not become what we fought against. You will stand trial for your crimes, a real trial, before the people you've oppressed." Throughout the city, similar scenes were playing out as resistance fighters, coordinated and equipped by human technology, overwhelmed Zolfar's confused forces. The quantum disruption had been precisely targeted, affecting only those with cybernetic enhancements, Zolfar's elite, while leaving civilian systems untouched. Within hours, the palace was secured, and Zolfar was imprisoned in the same cells that had held countless resistance fighters. Emergency broadcasts announced the end of his regime and the formation of a provisional government, led by surviving members of the original Planetary Council, with Vexara as acting security coordinator. 1 week later, Captain Chen stood with Vexara on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The signs of celebration were still visible, though the serious work of rebuilding had already begun. "Your people will face challenges," Chen said. "Rebuilding institutions, establishing trust, dealing with Zolfar's supporters who still believe in his vision." Vexara nodded, her scales now gleaming their natural iridescence in the sunlight. "Yes, but for the first time in 8 cycles, we face those challenges as free Caledonians." And she added, looking at Chen, "with new allies. Earth is eager to establish formal diplomatic relations. Our technologies complement each other in interesting ways. Why did you help us? Vexara asked, the question that had been on her mind since the humans first appeared. The truth, not the diplomatic answer. Chen considered her response carefully. Humanity has a complicated history. We've been both the oppressor and the oppressed. We've seen rulers like Zolthar rise on our own world, and we've paid terrible prices to remove them. When we first ventured into space, we made a promise to ourselves. We would not stand by while others suffered under tyranny if we had the power to help. She looked out at the horizon, where the crystal forests caught the light of Caladan's setting sun. But we also learned that true freedom can't be imposed from outside. It must be claimed by those who will live under it. You and your resistance were already fighting. We just provided the opportunity you needed. Vexara placed a three-fingered hand on Chen's shoulder in a gesture of friendship. One strike. That's all it took in the end. Not to destroy Zolthar, but to show our people that he wasn't invincible. That change was possible. Below them, Caledonians moved freely through the streets, without fear of surveillance or arrest for the first time in years. Children played in parks that had been military staging grounds just days before. The transformation was still fragile, but undeniably real. We have a saying on Earth, Chen said. The most powerful force in the universe is an idea whose time has come. Freedom was that idea for Caladan. As the two leaders stood watching the sunset, ships from Earth were already arriving in orbit, bringing diplomatic delegations, humanitarian supplies, and the promise of a new alliance. The quantum communication network established by humans was allowing Caledonians across the planet to participate in planning their new government. Elsewhere in the palace, Dr. Rice was working with Caledonian medical experts to treat those injured during Zolthar's rule, while Engineer Patul helped restore critical infrastructure damaged in the brief conflict. The integration of human and Caledonian technology was already producing innovations neither species could have developed alone. The fall of Zolthar would be remembered not just as the end of a tyrant, but as the beginning of something greater. The moment when Caladan joined a wider community of worlds, united by a shared commitment to freedom and self-determination. In a single, precisely targeted strike, humans had helped liberate an entire world. Not through overwhelming force, but through careful planning, advanced technology, and faith in the Caledonians' own desire for freedom. It was, Vexara reflected, a lesson Caladan would carry forward as they rebuilt their society. True power came not from domination, but from liberation, from recognizing the fundamental dignity of all beings and their right to determine their own destiny. Beyond the horizon, the first stars of evening appeared, including one that had been unknown to Caledonians until recently. Around that distant star orbited a blue planet called Earth, home to a species that had traveled across the void not to conquer, but to connect. Humanity had arrived just when they were needed most, and Caladan would never be the same.